Here for our final edition of the Bobcast here in the 2018-19 academic and athletic year. It is a one-sport episode. It is track and field here with head coach Dale Louie, and track and field, 12 men, 7 women to the All-Atlantic Region Track and Field Conference Outdoor Championships at Cortland this past Wednesday, Thursday. Some AARTFC highlights. Robbie Romano goes out with his best 1,500 time in his career. Second place finish. Michael Belcher second in the discus. James Nail top 6 in the javelin. Coach, we've talked about these AARTFCs. It's billed as a chance to compete against some really great competition. How was the meet and how were the performances from your team?
Competition was as advertised. It was very good. Facility, the track was outstanding. Facility, the javelin throw was not a surface or a condition that we would have necessarily liked to have had taking place, but it was fair for everybody. Everybody's throwing off of it. So we took advantage of that in some of the areas, as the results showed. In some other areas, we didn't perform, quite as we would hope. You're always hoping last meet of the year that, people go out with a bang.
Is it kind of, we've talked about ECACs in the past, a chance for a meet like this where you have to meet standards to get in? For those athletes that do qualify and get to compete, is it a reward for a really strong season in terms of those individual events?
It definitely is. And there's no doubt that the vast majority of our athletes, at the beginning of the season, are honed in on, what are those qualifying standards, no matter what it is, whether it's conference or, in this case, that regional meet. And and they do pay some attention to the regional rankings and the national rankings. Of course, that becomes more intense depending on, how they're performing themselves individually. But, like all sports, there's different ways to generate some motivation, and for us, those postings definitely help with the motivation, and people are disappointed if they can't make like that regional meet, because it is something that that they're shooting for.
Yeah, another week or two
Right.
of training in outdoor track and field, a half dozen chances to put up your results. That's a big opportunity.
Yeah.
Getting one more.
Well, I mean, we had 5 individuals that. On the male side, that met the standard to actually be entered into consideration for placement at the national meet, and we had individuals in different events and things, which I think is a hallmark of a track and field team, and a lot of schools don't do that, and sometimes they maybe experience some good success because they're loaded in the sprints or loaded in distance or whatever. But we've always, I've always tried to have a track and field team. It's not easy to do. You need some support for that, but we, that's our goal, to try to be strong in all the event areas.
That's a good point, and I want to use that to transition into more big picture here for both men's and women's track and field. We'll start on the men's side, as you mentioned, 5 guys declaring being in that top 50 leaderboard to even have that opportunity to be considered for nationals. We've talked about it all year. You just brought it up. Can you speak how this year's group really was a true track and field team in the sense of top to bottom competitiveness and event coverage, and how hard that is, and were you expecting it coming into the season?
Well, I don't think we were expecting the performances in all the different event areas that we did receive throughout the course of the year. And to be honest with you, we never had a meet where we were clicking on all cylinders. From the standpoint, we were able to win some invitationals and do well at conference and get people at regionals because we had people in different event areas, so that there were some meets where the jumpers maybe didn't perform up to snuff, and another event group would pick it up. In another meet, it'd be another event group perhaps not doing quite as well as we might want, but again, we had some depth in some of the other areas to pick it up. So that's one of the reasons why throughout the year that on the men's side we were pretty consistent meet to meet, because we had that kind of depth in the different event areas. Coming into the season, we knew we had bodies in those areas. How they perform, you never quite know. So, performance-wise, we do pretty well.
big picture here for men's track and field. Winners at Messiah and Gettysburg in those invitationals, third at CACs, 3 individual conference champions, 4 individual runners-up at CACs. I've tried to look through those CAC results since this era started. I know the season has just ended, but could you say for this men's side if not the top to bottom team that you've had in this CAC era?
I would almost maybe have to say no.
There you go.
Outdoors-wise, we probably held it together and continued to perform better than some of our teams through the years. We did have a second place showing there indoors, and that team was loaded, loaded in different ways. We didn't have as much depth in the jumps. We didn't have as much depth in the throws, but we were loaded in some other areas that, quite frankly, this year we weren't loaded. Speaking of the middle distance and the sprints were stronger there when we finished second there. But I think this team really, the thing I'm most proud of is that they just kept pecking away, and kept at it at meets. And you touched on a little earlier, kind of the idea of looking at results and motivation there. And it's always interesting as a coach to sit there at meets and start hearing your athletes talking about, hey, we need this, we need that. We're in second place, we're in first place, or whatever. And we had a lot of meets this year where on that men's side we were able to have that going on, and that does dramatically build the momentum and the enthusiasm for the team, and people feed off of that.
And fed all the way to a couple individual or invitational championships at Messiah and Gettysburg. I want to get into a couple of the little groups here for men's track and field. The distance crew I want to start with. Of all of our athletes here at Frostburg, these guys and women's runners are going the longest. Robbie Romano headlines that group. Can you speak to that area, those distance guys coming from cross country, indoor, outdoor, and how they performed as a group this year?
Really outstanding. We were led there by a group of seniors. You mentioned Robbie and Matt Whitley's in that group, and we had Phil and Zach, Talbert, part of that there, and they've kind of rubbed off and created some of the atmosphere that the other guys have bought into. Our distance program has dramatically on the men's side improved in depth and in quality the last couple of years. Hopefully the returners can keep that going. Robbie had really a very amazing year. I mean, when you look at his performances week after week after week, whether starting with cross country and going all the way to this last meet at Cortland, you sometimes as a coach start thinking, all right, can he keep this going? And he did, right to the very end. Right to the very end, meaning that after he ran that 1500 and was totally gassed at the regional meet, he's coming back, about an hour or so later, and anchoring the 4x8. Yep. And you knew he was tired. You could see he was tired. He was fighting it, and yet, that last 300 meters, once again, just gutting it out with whatever he had in there, and I think he's doing that in part because he's got 3 other guys in that relay team that he can see, doing the same thing, and so, it's an individual sport, track and field and cross country, but at the same time, teammates are still important, and I think that distance crew there, they worked together and took a lot of pride in what they did, and hopefully they can keep that rolling.
An incredible body of work for Robbie this season, and as you've said, that whole group. I thought it was remarkable that he had won a race in every single outdoor track meet up until AARTF season. He ran a great race, second place, best time in his career, and he was doing it at the 800, the 1500, the 3000, the 5. He won so many different races.
Right, and then you look at this cross country with an 8K distance there, and he ran some 5K distances, and so really probably one of the most versatile performances throughout the course of the year of anybody in our region, certainly.
Yeah, just an outstanding season for him. I want to shift to the throwers here on the men's side. John Kearns, Michael Belcher, James Nail. Those were three of the guys that were part of the five guys that had top 50 marks in some of their respective events. All were all CAC guys this year. All showed up on those national leaderboards. Did this year surprise you with not only just getting there, but having three different guys in these different events surprise you with how well the throwers showed up this year?
Not really. I mean, you go back to when some of these guys like John Kearns were freshmen and stuff, and Coach Kendall Louie and I, talked at that time about the fact that, here was a guy that was probably going to be breaking, J.R. Lowry's records and stuff, and he's done that at least in one event. He's got a ways to go there in the shot put and stuff. So the talent was there. In those events, really what it becomes is an issue of, are you willing to work at the technique to get better? Because you can get stronger and not necessarily throw further. You need to have the proper angles and proper releases and things of that nature to get better. And it's quite frankly why you see a bunch of throwers who, they're decent, but they never really seem to get significantly better. So we've been blessed. There was a culture established a number of years ago. Christian Smith and Coach Kendall Louie started that really, and we have built off of that over that period of time. And that area is what it is in part because there's a tradition there. There's an expectation. That we need to make finals. We need to score points. This team, looks to us for points. And I give credit to those throwers because they know there's some pressure on them in that regard. And they've performed, relatively well this year.
You touched on Kearns. What did Belcher add to the equation coming in this year?
Well, Mike's was a transfer student, and this was his first year here. And here's another person. There's a world of potential. He's athletic. He's aggressive. He loves to throw. Technique I just mentioned is the area that if he can nail that down, he will have a fantastic season next year.
Yeah, all-region teams came out this Monday. Kearns and Belcher, both all-region guys in the hammer throw. Two out of the top three. Kearns number 1 in the region. Belcher number 3. And you can find him down by the softball field throwing pretty much any day in the spring.
That is correct.
That is correct. I want to get over to the jumpers and the sprinters. Obviously, Shamar Nelson, a great indoor season, banged up a little bit in the outdoor season, but he's still the headliner there. DJ Wiseman ends up winning the 100-meter finals at CACs. Clayton Washington has a nice year. Many times this year, multiple long jumpers in finals, scoring points. Relays finding a way to score points. What can you say about that whole area? Sprinters, jumpers, relays, and how those guys have really come together, and a lot of younger guys, a lot of older guys. What can you say about that group?
It's definitely a younger developing group there. With the exception of Shamar and Chris Healy, again, technique is going to be very important for those guys to get better. There was a level of inconsistency that as a coaching staff, I think we'd like to try to eliminate. So there are things we need to do in that area as well as some other areas. But again, there's a boatload of talent there that really could make some noise in the future.
Finally, moving forward, men's track and field coming off of this year, the team was deep. Good coverage, some competitive high-end talent, losing some key contributors, of course. What do you see in store for returners in the future, and what kind of development are you looking for from your returners here on the men's side?
In track, you're asking there?
Yes.
We really are loaded. The coaching staff next year is going to be blessed with a core that should right off the bat be highly competitive. In the Mountain East, we have the ability there to, if we can get a little bit of support, to, I think, go in and get their feet wet in Division Two. At the national level, it's a different ball game.
Sure.
At the conference level, I really don't see much change from where we're at right now. In fact, our people were looking at those conference results and comparing them with our present D3 results, and actually getting rather excited about the fact that we were moving into this particular conference. So they recognize that they have the ability to go in and make some noise. Of course, you got to do it too, and so you always with your team need to try to keep working at it. And this group did well. They could have done better. They certainly are not a group that can rest on their laurels, so to speak, because they're not quite that good. They need to get better, and that's what it's all about.
Well, it's been a fun men's track and field season. We're excited for next year. We'll shift over to the women's side and the started in cross country, indoor track, outdoor track. Smaller rosters, some injuries to battle, but some big storylines all year. Kirsten Tawney, Holly Van Wee re-breaking school records in the hammer throw. Tawney ends up being your CAC championship. Kayleen Estrada coming back and winning the 400-meter hurdles at CACs. Cassandra Vogel getting to AARTFCs in the javelin. Amy Tremblay comes along here in this second semester and gives you an option third in the high jump at CACs. So you look at the women's season, you understand the smaller rosters, the injury concerns. How is this group still able to achieve some of these highlights and continue to grow this season?
Well, they were a small group, and I think by the end of the year they got a little bit tighter there on a personality side of things, which I think held them together. They recognized that they needed to support each other, and they went out and tried to pull some things together. It's a very strange year in terms of injuries. We had a number of injuries to some very quality people that were long-lasting and, in fact, season-ending injuries. We've probably never, in my time here, we've never been hit with that as bad as we were, this year. And it hurt us on the relay side. Historically, we've had, some nice relay teams, and on paper this year, we should have probably had some nice relay teams. But, when you've got some people out for extended periods of time or out for the year, it really gets in the way of that. So our focus kind of shifted, to more of an individual focus. And those individuals who, were able to stay healthy and keep at it, did well. I mean, Sidani Brown, had a great year in distance. She finally broke that 230 barrier. That was, one of her goals. And she and Sarah McCurry are just two remarkable distance runners for us from the standpoint that, neither one of them really had, well, Sarah had no high school experience. And Sid didn't have high school experience, certainly, in what she's been running. And the two of them, just through continuing to work at it, have really, really made themselves competitive runners. And you go over on the sprint side there, hurdle side. Kayleen Estrada continues to get better every single year. She is somebody who, I think, example, we at the regional meet there, scheduled to run the 400 hurdles, ran the 4x1. Her leg had been bothering her a little bit, and after consulting with their trainers up there, we just decided, hey, she's got another year to run. We're not going to chance a major injury here. So she didn't run the 400 hurdles, which was a major disappointment for her because, she was on that point of getting down into the 64s, and you're starting to talk something there when you get down 63s, 64s, and she's got that ability. And again, is a person who's continued to work at the craft, and her hurdling techniques improved tremendously. We're working on her speed side of things. We have on that women's side some women coming back that could have some really nice years next year. And the question is how fast can the newcomers merge with the returners?
What made the women's team so successful in the hammer throw this year?
Well, they spend a lot of time on a hammer throw. Yeah, they probably spend more time on a hammer than I think most any other event, and so it shows, in terms of performance and stuff. Uh, I, that throws group is very males and females, very supportive of each other, and they do push each other, and they rib each other, and it's kind of a always an interesting dynamic, and uh, I think that's an event area that the women are pushed by the men, and the women push the men, and so Holly and Kirsten are not afraid to get out there and work hard and get dirty, and it's paid off for them. They both made some big jump ups this year in the hammer. We didn't have a lot of women over there, but the three women we had going there really scored some points for us.
Yeah, all of them ended up qualifying for AARTFCs. We'll throw Cassandra Vogel in there with the javelin. How was Amy Tremblay an example of someone who can come in and make a difference in their first season here at FSU?
Well, Amy was somebody that I just tracked down. I saw that she was transferring into school here, and she went to the same high school as Holly Van Wee. So between the two of us, we worked on her a little bit about coming out when she got to school here, and she came out, and obviously, as you pointed out, it's done very well in the high jump. Started to do some things in the pole vault, shows some ability over there. And late, we had her picking up, or she picked up a javelin, and she has some real potential there. In fact, I think she might have more potential there than in the pole vault if somebody would keep working with her there. So she's right off the bat a multi-event person. She really loves the sport. She loves being out, and she's the kind of person that I think you can start to build a program around, because she's positive, and she just enjoys being around her teammates and trying different things, and she's got an open mind about those things. So she's been a real plus to the program in the short period of time that she's been here, and envision that will continue to grow.
Yeah, just in this second semester. With this women's team moving forward, obviously looking to grow in size, but how can this year's experience for all the returners really shape next year's team? Only Van Wee is listed as the only senior. How can this year shape next year's team and beyond?
Well, I think they really, on that women's side, I think they have finally learned that they need to be a little bit more supportive of each other. We've got a group of women who had quite a bit of success last year, and were quite disappointed this year. With there's a big drop off to be among the top relay teams in the country, and and then this year find it difficult because of injuries and whatnot to compete. So hopefully that leaves them a little bit hungrier and smarter. We talked already as a collective group that the heavy lifting, literally the lifting, needs to be done over the summertime, and I've taken the time to point out to a number of people different things they can be doing technique-wise in their events over the summertime, and whether they follow through on that, is up to them, really, as we all know. But if some of them take that time to do that, I think they'll be pleasantly surprised with, the results next year.
The track and field athletes, especially the distance people who go fall, winter, spring, it's a long year. You're always in season. Despite the injuries on the women's side, a successful season on the men's. Was this a fun year? How will you remember this season just in general?
I said to a couple of our departed coaches who were coaching other parts of the country, they check in with me all the time, and they know some of the people and whatnot, and they continue to have interest in how we're doing, which I think is great. I said to them that this was a group that was early on a little different than most, from the standpoint that the vast majority of them showed up for practice, and they showed up on time, and there was some good communication there when there were class conflicts and things of that nature, and they were an enjoyable group of people to be around. And I think part of it was that there really weren't too many people out there whose head was too big. They had things in perspective. There was competition for spots on some of the relays, which always is a good motivator for the team. So, I really look forward to that. Look back at them as kind of a fun group to be around, and the distance group, of course, being around them, 3 seasons out of the year and stuff. Always an interesting group. Some of their conversations are academic and in nature and things, and it's kind of neat to be around student athletes. And I think we had a nice mix of that this year. So group I definitely will remember and enjoy being around.
Well, for me, it was a fun year as well to follow the journey, cross-country, indoor track, outdoor track. Coach, thank you all season long for taking the time and chatting with us for the final time here on the Bobcast.
Thank you for the coverage. We very much appreciate it.